Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this evening for an update at Bennett. For this evening, for our agenda, I'll be talking about an enrollment update, kind of walking you through a little bit of past, present, and future, our goal for the 24-25 school year for next year, our current applicant families, so those that are currently exploring Bennett as an option. Then we'll go through some finance update around our priority spending. I'll share tuition for the 24-25 school year, and then go through some of our calendar, the major dates. I know as you look forward to planning for the next school year, this is important. And then lastly, some facilities updates with some pictures that you can see as you've been driving up. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that in progress, but I did want to share out that final phase of construction, what it does include, show you some of the pictures, even a brief video of some of the work in action to highlight some of the new space. Okay, so starting with enrollment kind of growth at Bennett from the past, present, and future. And I've shared this slide before, but it's, I think, always good to kind of put in context as we continue to see how we grow. Looking back, our enrollment grew 27% from 249 pre-pandemic to the 316 that we started with in 22-23. And we're very excited about the future. Looking at the 24-25 school year next year, applications are up. So currently, those families that are coming in and applying to Bennett, they're up 22% this year. So our applications across the school are up 22% from the previous year. With more that will be coming in during our rolling admissions process. So that's really exciting. This year, we have really been working on prioritizing touch points and emphasizing touch points and kind of building relationships within our community. We now have middle and upper school ambassadors, which maybe some of you have been able to see in action if you've been in the building. They've been doing a wonderful job sharing about their experience, sharing more about the school that they love. And we've already begun to welcome in new students into our building for either play dates for our early childhood. We actually have one tomorrow. Another one tomorrow, and or shadow days for our students that are entering first grade and up. And so you might hear from some of your children coming home that they've had some visitors in their classroom. So we are in the process of welcoming those students into the building. So looking at retention, I shared a little bit at the beginning of the year in the fall at the community address, meaning retention, our families that are currently enrolled at Bennett, what our goals are to keep all of you here with us. And so our retention goal is 88%, which is a 3% increase from what our goal was last year. So last year, our goal for retention was 85%, which we met, and we've increased that to by 3% going into this year. What feels good is the family satisfaction survey that we sent out gave us a net promoter score of a 60, which compared to a 51 from last fall. And knowing that kind of 50 is that benchmark of being really great and exciting. So feeling good about our overall family satisfaction, knowing we continue to improve and want to continue to improve, we'll continue to survey all of our families at the end of the second trimester and at the end of the year as well. And then I also shared at the first community address in the fall that we did form a retention committee. So a community experience committee was formed. And this is a kind of cross-departmental team of administrators, and they're committed to keeping students and families from leaving the school. And so the committee's job is to assess students at risk of leaving by tracking and analyzing kind of markers of engagement, and then to gather and assess data on retention trends as a whole for the school and for particular subgroups. So for example, grade levels, specific grade levels, and student demographics. And then to really work to coordinate retention efforts across the entire school. And so starting with our administrative cross-departmental team, the team has met already now from the beginning of the year for 2 full day sessions thus far, and is in the process then of planning to bring in other key faculty members, parents, and students. So listed on the slide here are subgroups that the committee's excuse me, that the committee has broken into to dig further. So stay tuned for more information on if you are interested in participating as a parent or guardian in this process. I see a question coming up. How is a student family identified as at risk of not returning? Good question. So there's a lot more around. We actually track engagement, which is a lot more than necessarily just being at risk. So for example, we look to see for the directors reach out to the division directors may reach out at the beginning of the year to new families to have coffees, or those coffees that we participate in the beginning of the year, conference attendance, offerings that we have for parents, like things like tonight was a book club for the early childhood. So some of the engagement that we see, are we having touch points? Are we having more kind of individualized experiences and connections? Are there some that we're missing that we need to make sure? All of that helps give you a pulse on just kind of what that connection and relationship has been with the school and home. But student families identified as risk could be things shared around, we know that families might be moving or have expressed like relocation for work potentially. So things that are shared, we also keep tabs on that too, but really more so looking at the overall engagement and where you might see, wow, we really haven't connected in a while, so that we can change our efforts, as opposed to so I'm looking at it more from a positive sense of connecting, as opposed to just being at risk too. So a lot of it is based on conversations. And so we work hard to make sure that we're increasing and improving our communication and connection too. So then if you look at this next slide for the forecasted enrollment goal for 24-25, our total enrollment goal for next year, just to share, as we grow into the building, the building is doubling in size. It also includes a large gym. We're not looking to double our enrollment in the next year. We want to make sure that we are growing at a healthy rate. We continue, and as we continue to do what we have in the past. So our enrollment goal is between 368 and 375. We will be graduating 20 seniors. So there are, just to share a little bit of how we get to that number. So there are 328 students that we have eligible to keep. Our graduates are moving beyond. And so we take that 328 students that can stay, and we look at that 88% retention. That's our goal. We want to have 88% retained that either aren't moving or relocating or things like that. To then would leave us at 289 students. Plus we add in our siblings or affiliates. And what that would mean is those that have younger siblings, so students that are already enrolled, younger siblings that are joining us, or faculty members. We actually have 2 faculty members whose children will be joining us next year. This year, that's highly variable year to year with how many siblings or what we call affiliates join this year. We have 10, about 10 versus last year we had 24. So it really kind of changes year to year. So that would get us to 299 students. And then plus then we're looking for about 76 brand new, which gets us to our overall goal. And so knowing that we have much lower affiliates, that's why I shared it could be a range around 375. So our general application deadline was December 11th. And as I shared, we've seen a 22% increase in the overall applications, which is wonderful. So not fully enrolled yet, just kind of starting the process of coming into the building, but everything is looking really good and kind of on track. So then I always think it's interesting to be able to see where the applicant families are, and also just in comparison to where our current families are situated. So on this map here, and also not all are on there, we're pulling from about 55 zip codes, and that's of currently enrolled families. So you can see in the red here is where our currently enrolled families are throughout the city. And then in the blue are where our applicants are coming from. So you can see, which is really nice to see, most likely from a lot of word of mouth that there are members of your communities coming and joining and applying, but that we also have in the bottom list here, the top 5 applicant zip codes that are accounting for about 50%, and there are 2 new neighborhoods represented. So it's wonderful to see kind of that word of mouth and that connection to the neighborhoods that already exist, but then knowing that there are 2 new neighborhoods that are predominantly represented in our applications currently, which are at Lincoln Park and Kenwood. And then I did want to share re-enrollment is right around the corner. It is by the end of day on Friday, February 2nd. You'll be receiving an invitation from Bennett Day School, but it's through support@tads.com. So that is the system that we use to re-enroll, to complete agreements. And then families who receive financial aid, you'll receive your grants in the enrollment agreements. So, keep an eye on that date for those agreements to come through. You'll be asked to complete some forms at that time that we actually use to take away from some of the logistics from the beginning of the year that you can do just through re-enrollment. You have the options for tuition protection plan, but I also did want to share the option of putting Peggy Lofgren, our business officer's email contact on here, that she's available for questions around if you would like to use a 529 plan that is available to you, or for tuition prepayment, that she is available to answer any of your questions as well. And so those re-enrollment agreements are going to be due Monday, February 12th. And the team is always there to answer any questions too. Okay, so some updates for the next school year that I wanted to share just generally. One is later on, I'll be going through the calendar, but I thought it would be a crowd pleaser to share by parent request. We have gone back to Rebecca, our former school photographer that took our student photos and were part of the yearbook. She had last year, it was her side business and was no longer going to be working with schools, just with her children at that point in time, was just something she was no longer going to be doing. But Kenzie Alonso, our front office administrator, called and basically begged and said how wonderful she is and is beloved by our community. And so she will be back for the next school year, which is very exciting. And we already have that all set up. So that is just kind of fresh news from this week. But also in thinking about next year updates too, we are starting our hiring process and will be soon. What that looks like for our faculty, which is really important, is we do a period of time where it's an intention to return, where our faculty have the opportunity to share their intentions to return and maybe express interest in a new grade level, maybe something additional like student government on top of their teaching position. So it's important to have that time to engage with our faculty that are here before we post new positions. So that is just starting off at the beginning of February. And then we will be posting our new positions, which as we grow, we will be adding an additional art teacher, additional middle school teachers for the growing middle school, and an athletic director. So that is just exciting things that we're moving into right now for the next school year. So then I did want to share just a finance update of kind of focusing on our priority spending, and I think overall emphasizing that our budget really does reflect our values. And so breaking this down on the left-hand side here, if we look at for every dollar of tuition at Bennett, we spend close to 60 cents or close to 55 cents of every tuition dollar on personnel. And so that means our classroom teachers, our specialist teachers, our administrators, everyone that you're interacting with, our aftercare leaders. And so you see in the blue kind of bar here that people are our largest investment. And we have over time, which I will show you and break down, we have increased dollars here dramatically, which is really important. This is in line with our peer schools, which you see kind of a broad range of everything from around 45 cents to about 70 cents of every dollar of tuition towards that overall bucket of personnel. And then you can also see beside personnel then, our people, which would be our families, is financial aid. So about 41 cents of every dollar of tuition. That's the next largest investment that we make in our budget. So we invest 41 cents of each tuition dollar into financial aid, while the average is only about 14% from our local peer schools. So this is a significant differentiator for us as an institution versus the personnel is more in line. Even as a mid-sized private school, the sheer dollars that we invest at Bennett in financial aid also puts us in the top quartile nationally for all private schools of any size. And that's according to NAIS, National Association of Independent Schools, and in a position well ahead of our peer schools here in Chicago. So again, really that, if you look at where we're prioritizing most of our spending, it is towards the people. I will share, and the next bucket there is the orange, and I am going to go through a breakdown of what our other expenses are. But about half of our other expenses, or a little more than half of our other expenses, directly impacts the students and their educational experience. So I'll walk through a little bit of what that looks like. And then next to that is the rent and taxes. For us, property taxes continue to go up year over year, as you're probably well aware. And rent will go up really materially when phase 3 comes online. And this is why, from the beginning, Bennett planned to build in phases. So then on the far right there, you can see then other inflows are incredibly important for us. So beyond each dollar that comes in for tuition. And this includes private funding, our auxiliary revenue, meaning anything that comes in from our aftercare programming or summer camp, and then also Bennett Labs. And Bennett Labs is the work that we do around professional development for other schools. And so private funding is not from our school families on the other inflows here. It is not from our families, but it's separately from financial supporters and investors who are family offices and individuals who want to support our innovative model here at Bennett. They're also oriented for a long-term growth at Bennett with us. And so Cameron Smith works with our current investors by keeping them updated on our progress through things like hosting an investor day, which we did in the fall, which was wonderful. They got to see our amazing program in action and hear updates of all the wonderful things that we're doing, and even start to see the beginnings of our physical growth as well. So I did mention our personnel priorities are in line with our other peer schools, and I want to share that is something that we have been prioritizing for the past couple years, and just to give a little bit of more context to that. So in 21-22, our focus really was around increasing overall salary for our teaching faculty. And so a lot of feedback from you as parents and guardians was around teacher retention, or feeling, we do have wonderful teachers, we want them to stay and be committed. And so this is an important piece of that. And so we did do a comp study for our teaching faculty of digging into the Chicagoland area, but then also more nationally as well. And so on this chart here, you see represented NAIS schools, which is the National Association of Independent Schools. And so it is across the country. And then Bennett. It is just looking at mid-sized schools, though. So schools that are about 300 to 500 total. It's hard. There's a lot of variables. Some are in cities, some aren't. Every city is different. But it's also important to look at the size of the school as well. So you see in 21-22, before we did the comp study, it dug in and made changes. You have the NAIS teaching faculty average was significantly higher in that blue bar here. Now, in this current year of 23-24, Bennett's teaching faculty average is higher than the national average, which is something that I'm very proud of and I feel is very important and to continue to do to ensure that we have quality teachers in our space and that they're compensated accordingly for the wonderful work that they do. So that was priority in 21-22 and will continue to be. Last year, 22-23, was to outline stipend duties. So another piece of compensation for faculty is our stipends, and those are for the additional roles that teachers play outside of just their teaching within their classroom. So some of these might be overnight trips, for example. We have those coming up. Although the faculty love going on those overnight trips, and I've done it myself for years and years with middle school students, I can't take back some of those memories. It's still important to compensate them for that time. Some things can be some of the additional duties and roles that are above and beyond the typical job description. And so that was important work for us to do to outline those stipends. Then for this school year, the priority is to focus on benefits. So we know that compensation is more than just salary. It is their benefits, which includes hard benefits. So we have a subcommittee of the board that has been working on exploring all options to ensure we can continue to offer robust medical benefits with increasing premiums year over year. But then we are also looking into soft benefits. So some of those extra perks that you might have at your jobs that you find value in. So exploring what our faculty find value in. If anyone out there has wonderful soft benefits that your company offers that you feel would be great for our teachers, let me know. If you have any soft benefits that you, as an owner of a space or some restaurant or things like that, would want to help offer a soft benefit to our community, also let me know. So that is the priority of this year. So when we look at kind of our priority spending, I wanted to break down personnel and our efforts so that you know all of these will continue to be priorities as we move forward, but it's something that we've continued to put more into the overall bucket, which is important. So then I wanted to break down the other expenses. That was back on the bar graph, the orange, kind of the third level of, or the third highest kind of expense that we have. So what goes into that? Most of it are things that directly impact our students. So our supplies, that it's important that we include the supplies. Anything that falls under curriculum, whether it's from the beginning of the year that we know we want, the consumables that we might have for handwriting for our younger students, to materials that are needed for project-based learning that come up as they're coming up with the students, to field trips, and then general and administrative expenses, which actually are mostly student expenses, more of kind of office supply materials and things like that. Vendors and professional fees. So this is when we bring in adjuncts to teach classes or other professionals to come in that help create more of a robust program. And then things like facility. So anything that's non-rent, our toilet paper, the cleaning supplies. I would argue that does directly impact the students and their experience, but not necessarily at a curricular level. And then the technology that we have, our infrastructure, but also the hardware that we provide. And then marketing, our HR, insurance, and legal. So those are some of the other expenses. But there is one area that I did want to dig into to share a little bit more about is field trips. So these are very small when I put them side by side, so it's okay if you can't see, I'll read them out loud. In looking at over the past 3 years, our field trips specific to buses, I thought this was kind of eye-opening the more we dig in. I pulled 3 field trips that they were from each year. It's hard, there aren't apples to apples comparison here. You have all of our trips are different. We don't necessarily have standardized every year. This class goes to this place. So I tried to find 3 examples where the mileage was about the same and the amount of time was about the same so that we could see. So in 21-22, taking a bus to the Chicago Food Depository, which is about 9 miles away from Bennett, being there for about 3 hours was $220. In the middle there, in 22-23, going to the Exploratorium, which is about 11 miles away, so pretty close, same amount of time, was $340. So from 220 to 340. And now this year in 23-24, going to the Gordon Center for Integrative Science, which is same number of miles, 9, same number of hours, 3 hours, was $569.45. So from these examples on here, from 21-22 to 23-24, 3 years, these examples show a 159% price increase for buses. So with these changes and continue to increase, and what's also really interesting too is one with the shortages of bus drivers and just how kind of fleets are running, there's more variability. It used to be that you could always get a bus, you knew it was going to be the same amount, whether it was a range of miles, and it was the same as long as it fell within the school time. There's a lot more. Every time we have a field trip, we get multiple quotes, and you have to cast kind of a wider net to set up buses. But we will continue to prioritize field trips. It's a huge part of our program, and we will ensure that our budget reflects that. So I did want to share, and thought it was important, we allocate $150,000 for school-wide for field trips. I will tell you that is significantly more than is happening anywhere else. But this is important. It's a huge part for project-based learning to be able to go out into the space, to be able to use the city as a classroom. So we've continued to increase that budget. We work hard to also then utilize public transportation that's available to us and walking trips when possible, because we want to be able to take as many trips as we can. We never want to run into a situation where we have to tell a class, we've used too much of the field trip budget to take another trip. We won't do that. We're going to continue to take all the trips that make the best experience for the students. So one thing I did want to share, we do also take public transportation. It isn't because buses have gone up this much. Like I said, we allocate about $150,000 for field trips. But we also do take public transportation when we can, which spreads our huge budget even further, yes. But it helps us utilize the city and the classroom in a different way. It's important for our students to build capacity in their ability to navigate the city. An example of, and we're not the only school that does this, so I thought a good example to share is that DePaul actually has a mandatory class that's called Discover Chicago. And although the students get to pick different topics that they're interested in, but the whole point of this class is to help you learn to navigate the city and of an area of interest for you, but which is really wonderful. So it's also having the option for our students in middle and upper school for them to self-dismiss and to take public transportation. For those of you that are on tuning in and have those students, it's a game changer for families having their children be able to come and go to school on their own eventually. But it's wonderful for them to have practice with this, with their teachers, with parent volunteers, to have practice going around the city in public transportation and learning that before they are doing that on their own. Personal experience of mine as a former volleyball coach of 8th grade boys. We had many games that were right off of the purple line. They weren't able to do it by themselves, so I took it upon myself to teach them, go with them for a period of time until they were able to, which was then, again, a game changer for families as they might be navigating with multiple children or aren't able to get off of work to do that at the time. So it also has other benefits built in. This is just a picture of the different field trips that we've taken this year, which I think is exciting. And so knowing that outside of, I think this was my way of kind of connecting the other expenses to people. It's to our kids, and it's to making, excuse me, to their experience inside the classroom, but also to their experience outside of the classroom. The list of places that we have visited this city already is significant, everywhere from Camp Pinewood to Art Institute to all of the museums that you can think of, to nature centers, different parks and libraries, Humane Society, theaters, Share Our Spare, Stay and Play games, cafes, so many different places that we will continue to visit for the rest of the year as well. Okay, and then I wanted to share our tuition and fees for the 24-25 school year. So knowing that tuition for families is a large investment, it's a large commitment for you to send your children to Bennett. And it's something that we don't take lightly. And so tuition this year, as we look at our expenses, as we look at some changes that we'll be making and growing that I will continue to share, we will have an overall increase of 4% across the board. And we know this is a large commitment for our families. We worked hard to hold that last year to just a 2% increase. But as our costs continue to increase, we want to ensure that we're delivering the best possible program that we can. For children that were attending extended day, there will be some changes in our weekly calendar that I want to share, and then I will come back to this as well. So you can go to the next slide. Actually go one more down. So one thing that we are changing that does kind of impact the overall cost of education of your children is on Wednesdays, we have had a half day for our students from preschool through 8th grade, with our upper school faculty dismissing half day, but having adjunct professors and electives in the afternoon for students. And so what that means is for students that stay for the full day, there's an extra, you're paying for that extended day time. So from 12:15 to 3:15 for those 3 hours for them to stay, which is, again, an additional expense. Next year, we will be shifting our Wednesdays for preschool through our pre-K through 4th grade. We will have an early release time on Wednesdays from 2:15. And why I'm saying early release is that it's a shortened time of a difference now of just an hour. It's a very common practice in schools to have an early release as opposed to a half day. And that early release is important because it ensures that faculty still have collaborative time weekly that is built in. Our middle and upper school students will have Monday through Friday will be full days. The teachers will still be released at 2:15, they're core teachers, so they will still have that collaborative time. And middle and upper school students will have adjuncts and elective kind of courses at that time. But the biggest shift for our middle and upper school students, or I should say for actually all of our students across the board, is that they will have their core classroom teachers for 2 additional hours on those Wednesdays, which is also really important. It's consistency for the students. It's consistency for the teachers too, and having them be with their classes more throughout the week. With our teaching faculty, that does mean, though, we have had from 12:15 to 4:15, 4 hours of time weekly that we use for professional development. It is incredibly important to deliver the program that we do for them to have collaborative time together and for them to continue to grow as educators. So we've looked at how we can do this differently. So how can we take that chunk of time and potentially spread it out throughout the week in different ways so that it isn't just coming at that Wednesday time. So we will still have from 2:15 to 4:15. So every week, the faculty, they'll stay beyond that typical dismissal time. So we'll still have, as a whole faculty, time every week. We'll still have time for professional development. And then we are prioritizing the build of our schedule throughout the week so that we are ensuring that our teams have more planning time than they have had in the past. So a good example of this, of what will change, is looking at lunch and recess support. So if all of our teaching faculty are on lunch and recess, then it takes away their ability to plan collaboratively. So that's an example of where changing the schedule throughout the week can still ensure they have that important time together. So if you go back up to the previous, go 2 slides up for me. Thank you. For children, so I said it's a 4% increase across the board. For children that were attending extended day on those Wednesdays and paying the extended day rate for that half day, the overall increase for actually our incoming JK to 4th families will only be an overall increase of 2.5%. So if you had been staying for your children all day on Wednesday, if you're at work or still pick them up at the dismissal time of 3:15, or maybe staying for the aftercare block, because of the additional school hours and what you won't be paying in that, it's really only a 2.5% increase as opposed to those half-day sessions. And middle and upper school will not have any additional cost. and the students will benefit from additional class time on Wednesdays taught by our full-time faculty, as well as the elective in the afternoon. So this was important to share out, I thought, all of that information transparently. Okay, so now the calendar. So I shared what the weekly calendar will look like, but I did want to share calendar at a glance, which will be in the email following this recording so that everyone will now have access to, and we'll be posting it in the bulletin regularly. In looking at our construction and starting the year, we did take a look at, for the first time, we've always followed really the same calendar, and it's every year you look at maybe how certain dates fall, but you continue to start around the same period of time. Everything from our construction is absolutely on time. I'll go through some of the updates, which is exciting, but we just think about how much we prioritize the beginning of the school year and how important the environment is in the beginning of the school year, and everything we do. From we have intake conferences that are before really that first day of school, and the open house and orientation, all of that, the full facility has to be set up for. Even when teachers come back, they come back to school 2 weeks earlier than the students come in. So much of the professional development work time that we do is around setting up and creating the environment. And so we want to make sure that we're giving us as much space as possible to make that as seamless as possible. So again, nothing is behind on schedule. Everything's on schedule. But we did make the decision to push back the start of the year to starting after Labor Day. This is for 1 year. This is because of the construction coming online, that we can ensure that everything is set up the way that it should be, and it's as smooth as possible for the start of the year. It's just an additional buffer time for us. And so having school start after Labor Day. Now, if everyone says that they love it and that's the feedback we get, maybe we would evaluate it, but this is a 1 year change. Now, knowing that pushing back school, that could leave, for some of you that do enroll in camps or your children are in camps, it could leave more time without childcare. So we are pushing camp to go back further. We've added an additional week. We pushed it back, and we've added an additional week as an option to go through August 16th. That is actually when a lot of camps are closed and no longer in session. So we want to make sure that we're still providing that opportunity. So if you're counting through and thinking through in your head right now, how much am I going to be scrambling this summer before the school year starts? Really, there's 1 full week after camp would end. And then that following week, which is when things at school start, though, like intake conferences and open house and orientation. So it's 2 years. So this year at a glance calendar, we still have the full week for Thanksgiving break. Winter break next year will fall back to a Monday to Friday. Our February and spring break dates are in there. The dates for our last day of school and graduation conference days are in there. So that will be in the email communication that you can have going forward. Okay. And now to share some facilities updates, which is exciting. For the phase 3 of, now that you see more and more of it coming online, you can see the full height. It's starting to get closed up on the inside. What is actually in that space, I don't think I've ever laid out. There are 10 new classrooms in that space. There are 3 new labs, a new library, and a library and piazza space, which is kind of piazza, a place to come together as a community for students, like things like community gathering, or even for parents and guardians for different events. A full-size athletic facilities with a running track, which I have some pictures of that we'll share, and locker rooms. There will be then 2 new entry points, or not 2 new, there will be 2 entry points. So a separate entry point for middle and upper school students, and one for early childhood and lower school. What's really nice about that is early childhood and lower school having their entry point, and the second entry point being middle school, who starts from 8 to 8:15, and then upper school that starts at 9. They don't have the same arrival and dismissal windows, but will have an entry point where they're never at any point coming in and out of the building with maybe 3 or 4-year-olds. Although I think they'll miss that, to be honest. It provides upper and middle school with an additional 12 learning spaces. It allows for an expanded cafeteria, which I'm going to show a picture of so that you can see. and it continues to prioritize community safety. So a big part of the new phase coming online is that we could continue to look at our safety and security, look at it in the new phase, but then also reevaluate it again then as a whole, which is important. And with the whole space supporting our approach to learning. And by that meaning the classrooms, the spaces are flexible with things like barn doors. So there's a connection between the classrooms, the ability to come and go together, to come together as a full grade level or separate out. And then with as much really flexibility as possible so that we can kind of flex the space for what the students need, the students that are in front of us, maybe for that point in time, but then also from a day-to-day basis as well. And as I mentioned before, it is on schedule for opening the 24-25 school year. So I have some photos here and to give a little bit more information. So on the left side here, the building isn't fully closed, so these pictures aren't ideal yet, but you can see on the left side, on the top left-hand side is the gym. So you can see how huge it is, which is really exciting. And then right above that, so in the top picture, you can almost see the track on the right-hand upper corner. But then in the left, on the left bottom picture is the track. So you see that track that runs along the second floor of the gym on the outside, which is really exciting, starting to see that. As soon as we can get people safely inside the space and it's all closed in, we will do that so that we can see. So that's just a view of the gym. And then the other space that I wanted to share, there is a video here of what the piazza and library space will look like, which is really exciting. I think this will be, in my opinion, the most beautiful space in the school. All of that's open will be windows. You have large, so these are regular steps coming up, but large open steps that look almost like the Apple Store, where there'll be cushions where kids can sit, or adults can sit, can spread out to enjoy books. The top here is a full, very large size room, which will be the library, which will house the library for our early childhood and lower school. You can pause that video here because now I'm not sure where it's. Then on heading down those steps and at the bottom level will be housed the library and access to books for our middle and upper school. So there will be wonderful separation between those texts and the library for our younger students and then those for our older, but it will be a beautiful space for all of our students to be able to enjoy. Our early childhood and lower school students will be able to regularly attend library, which is something that we're prioritizing for next year, to have someone that is on site to consistently bring to schedule classes to come in. And then we're working through what times our middle and upper school outside of community gatherings can use it as more of a social breakout space, as well as a place. For example, when students are coming in early in the morning, isn't it nice for them to transition into a space like that, to be able to socialize, to read, to spread out, to do work in a beautiful space with windows and books surrounding them too. And so then on the next slide here is the lower level. I mentioned an extended cafeteria. So you see in the blue, the cafeteria is our cafeteria that is for mostly our lower school, will be for mostly our lower school. And then in the green here, now we are almost doubling in size that space for our middle and upper school students. That does not mean that they will all be there together. As someone who's been a supervisor of lunch duty for adolescents for years, it's important for that space to have not only tables, but also more of loungy areas with vending as well. So you have cafeteria style seating, but then also more kind of spread out lounge areas with vending. So that will be extended in our current space. And then so it's almost doubling in size. Where the purple box is represents what the additional setup will look like for our stage. So right now, when you've been in the gym, that will be the gym for mostly our early childhood and some of the early elementary years. You see the stage that's there, but we will be putting in curtain light, looking at lighting and exploring sound options. Actually, the pipe and draping for the curtains will be done for our production in the spring. So we will be building out that stage area. As well as we move into the new phase, we will still have the stage option for smaller productions in the new wing in that piazza setting that I shared. So depending on what the performance might look like. That is another option. However, now that the cafeteria is being extended, a stage is being built out and there's actually space being dedicated for that. And we will get to see some of that work starting in the spring for the spring production, which I saw some of our middle school ambassadors actually preparing for reading and rehearsing their scripts, which is exciting. So I see a question in the comments. So please feel free if you have questions to drop them in the chat. Can you provide a bit more detail regarding investors? Who are they? Investors typically expect a return on their investment. How much is that and when will it be paid? Great question. So our investors are mostly individual family practices or individuals that feel very strongly about the mission and vision of Bennett and have invested in it around sentiments of wanting to be a part of positive impact investing. They are very patient and are focused on the long-term growth of the school versus a return, a quick return on investment. And so that is something, as we've continued to grow, been very clear, like we continue to grow until we reach kind of a larger capacity for the investors to get a return on that. We are not in the stage of right now, just continuing to update our investors of where we are as we continue to grow to reach, once we have our building on fully online, it opens up different opportunities for us in the next coming years, which is when really more of the information around what I think the changes around, not changes around investors, but what that will look like outside of just continuing to fundraise. And so that probably in January community address of next year will be something that I'll dig into a little bit more. So how do we shift from the continuing to bring in investors and sharing about our growth to how we are going to be paying out our investors over time and what that looks like. Great question. So great news about enrollment. I'm like, I agree. It's very exciting. Where are we mostly seeing the increases in applications? So kind of what, which grades and divisions. So part of our priority had been to focus on the entry points. And so we did, and by entry points, I mean the typical points that students will enter schools. So our pre-K, our JK and SK would be our natural early childhood entry points, and ninth grade. But then also starting to look at middle school as an entry point, which is common too. So you have schools that might be K-5 where students are transitioning, or you see a lot of students transition when they've had one experience somewhere else and are looking for a new experience as your students move into middle school. So we have seen an increase in numbers in our entry points. But also, let's see, we had large increase in our incoming sixth, which isn't the start of our middle school, which has been wonderful, and seventh, which is non-entry point, and then really a sprinkling across the board. So it is an overall healthy increase across the board, but we do know that our entry points that we're focusing on did also all increase. And then those kind of outliers of where we didn't expect maybe were the sixth and seventh where the numbers came in higher, which is great. Okay. Well, thank you to all of you that tune in. If you have other questions from this presentation, things you'd like to know more or talk about more, I am hosting Listen to Learn opportunities. I would love to have you sign up for them. They're really just an opportunity to have a one-on-one meeting. I would love to meet with as many of you as possible. That's how I get to connect instead of just speaking out to large crowds. If there's anything on here that you're curious about, things that I didn't share, you really just want to come in and chat, I can hear more about your experience, would be wonderful, which is exciting. So please, those are in the bulletin. And if the times aren't filled, I'm just sitting there in my office. So please come in, feel free to chat, bring more questions, and thank you for tuning in.